In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. Tonight on America in Black and White, we explore the power of building community, shaping futures, and transforming institutions from the inside out. In every generation, there are individuals who don't simply work within systems, they elevate them. They create pathways where non existent amplify voices that were once overlooked, and build structures that allow others to rise. Our guest this evening is one of those architects of change. In a world where student success is often measured by numbers, he reminds us that success is ultimately about people, their stories, their struggles, their dreams, and the support systems that help them thrive. From public universities to private institutions, from undergraduate advising to medical education, he has spent nearly 2 decades shaping environments their students can not only survive, but truly flourish. And at the Orlando College of Osteopathic Medicine, he has done that. He has done what few can claim. He helped build an entire student affairs division from the ground up, launching 39 student organizations, establishing, advising, and orientation programs, and creating the infrastructure that will support generations of future physicians. But his story is rooted in legacy, the legacy of John Lewis, and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the legacy of every Black leader who believed that service is the is the rent we pay for the privilege of living on this earth. Tonight, we welcome a leader, a builder, a mentor, and a visionary. This is America in Black and White, and this is the story of James McKnight. Let's bring Mr. McKnight to the show. And to the show, James.
Hello,
How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm excellent. Is
Awesome.
there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we get into the show?
Well, I guess I'll do like we do in church, say thank God for my chance of being here, giving honor to God and everybody that is in there, that's on the air. Definitely thank you for having me on the show today. It was really an honor and a pleasure to be here. So, thank you.
I definitely appreciate you. And there are these questions. I have someone that's saying hello before we get started. I put it on the screen. Ravenclaw Productions, and hello to you. And I hope you guys are having a great day. Please enjoy the show. So, can you tell us what early experiences shaped your understanding of leadership and service?
Oh, that's a good question. So I would say definitely my early experiences began in church. I grew up in church, and so that's where a lot of my teachings and learning experiences stem from. And so having those upbringing of being involved in church, not only as a member but as a PK, which often is a call a preacher's kid. We had that expectation that if nobody else child will do it, the preacher's kids will do it. So, so that's kind of what was the foundation of. Um, of me being able to learn about a lot of leadership skills and leadership qualities. So it started at home.
Um, Growing up, what did you imagine your future career would look like?
Well, I can tell you that ever since I was a little boy, I always wanted to be a teacher. I used to actually ask my mom to buy like school supplies so that I could pretend to be a teacher, so I could teach a class, and I would practice in front of my siblings and really take the time to just really practice those skills even at like 6 and 7 years old. So that was definitely a sign of me just really having a passion for education. But also, I can say that growing up, I was always inquisitive. I asked a lot of questions. I always wanted to learn. And so that too was another sign that I felt that I was really called to be in education.
So, with you saying that you feel like that was your true calling, what was the one thing that just pointed you in that direction?
Mm.
Because I know that, when we talk about education, I mean, there's so many facets, and when you're young, you're inquisitive, and there's so many things going through your mind. What was that one thing that stuck in your mind that made you say it's going to be education?
Yeah, I think for me, it was definitely role models. My uncle was a great role model for me. He was a dean at a college at Santa Fe College at the time. And he was someone that I really looked up to and was a really great example of balance between faith and family and education. And he just really had a way of inspiring young people in the next generation, and I really connected with him from a nephew uncle standpoint. And from that, it made me realize that this is something that I could see myself doing in terms of being able to just inspire young leaders. And so that was also really a great inspiration. But I can tell you that when I first started out in college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life.
Mm.
But it was definitely a journey of just really self-discovery, learning about myself, and learning about my strengths and things of that sort. And even though I had those aspirations as a kid, as you get older, you change, your mind changes, your values and everything that you see in your outlook on life just looks a little different as an adult. And so there was a lot of unclear or uncertainty of what I really wanted to do, but as I got older it really became clearer.
Mm. So, who were the mentors who guided you during your formative years?
Yeah, so I would say definitely, as I mentioned, my uncle, he was definitely one of my mentors that really took me under his wing. And because he saw a lot in me more than what I saw within myself. He really pushed me. I'll never forget when it was time for me to finish my associate degree. I went to school at home at Santa Fe. He was the one that really pushed me to kind of venture out and leave home, because I was really kind of comfortable and complacent in where I was, and he was the one that really encouraged me to kind of venture out there and spread my wings. And so for that, I really do appreciate his mentorship. But then there were others. I can think of many teachers, Sunday school teachers, vacation Bible school teachers, people that just really helped to shape me from a spiritual perspective as well as just personally.
So, what personal values have remained constant through your life?
I would say definitely my faith is a personal value that has remained constant. It started out with me being dragged to church, to then me going to church, to attending church, and then serving in church. So that has been a constant in terms of my faith growing as I grow in Christ, grow in the Lord. And then I would also say education has been something that I've always valued. I believe it's the one thing that no one can ever take from you when you once you have it, and it also is a powerful tool. So education is a huge part of my value, and then also family. Family means a lot. I love my family. I love my wife. I love my siblings, my parents, my nieces, my nephews. We spend a lot of time together, and I enjoy spending time with them. So those are other things that I really, really value.
So, how did your family influence your approach to education and community?
I would say definitely how they really influenced it. Well, I kind of talked about my uncle, how he has influenced my education. So to kind of focus more so on the community side, I will say my parents, which is Bishop James McKnight and First Lady Dolores McKnight, shout out to them at Start Church of God by Faith. They really inspired me to build community. I learned a lot about how to build community through watching them and how they cared for people and how they still care for the community, and how they do it unselfishly, how they do it inclusively. I've watched them love people of all walks of life. I've watched them give to people. I've watched them really sacrifice for the good of others. And I've seen a lot of what they have poured into others, and that have really inspired me to um, to really give to the community, to really give. And through volunteerism, I've volunteered at my church and at many ministries, and have seen the fruit of pouring into others. And so I've had the opportunity to not only witness that, but also be a part of it.
Mhm. There is a comment here. If you want to respond to it, that would be great. This is from Ravenclaw. It says, "Yeah, agreed. We all grow up to be better. I love the live stream."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy because I agree with Raven. Like you never know what you're being prepared for,
Mhm.
and so when you're serving in the community, you never realize how much it prepares you for the communities that you will encounter in your adult years. And of course, I know we'll probably talk about it in the future, but really serving the community even as a child and as a teenager, really prepared me for the service that I will provide as an adult. It's specifically in education. So,
What challenges did you face on your path to higher education leadership?
oh, that's a good question. Um, so, so I would say the challenges that I faced really was just being underrepresented. Statistics show that Black men are represents 3 to 4% of students who actually earn a college degree. And when you think about that, you think about, okay, why is that? Like, what's causing that underrepresentation, and how does that impact the journey of students like myself who choose to take on the journey of going to school? And are there systems that are built to support the 3 to 4% to turn that into 6 to 7% or 8 to 9%? And because of the journey, um, there was an opportunity and a challenge for me to really learn how to build my own community and to build my own village of people, of support, of mentorship, of people and really tap into resources that would allow me to experience higher education in a way that doesn't cripple me, or in a way that doesn't allow me to be a statistic of to where I'm just, where I don't succeed. And so for that, I would say that was probably the biggest challenge, is just being underrepresented.
Wow. So, was there a defining moment when you realized you were called to this work?
Absolutely. Yes. I would say that my defining moment was as when I served as an advisor at Valencia College. I had the opportunity to serve as the academic advisor. I also had a chance to teach as a faculty member. But my most defining moment was um, was me supervising the mentor program for Black and Hispanic male students. And in that program, um, was an opportunity to really impact the lives of students in a way that would change the trajectory of their life, to where when they graduate, they're not just preparing for their career, but they're preparing for what society will experience in society, should I say. And so I'll never forget the moment I worked with um, when I worked with those students, those male students. We did an induction ceremony, and in that ceremony, there was a requirement to wear a white shirt, black tie, and black pants. Well, on the day of the ceremony, I'll never forget that four or five of the guys did not know how to tie a tie, and that within itself was a defining moment for me, because it made me realize that in college only prepares you for you earning a degree, but it doesn't prepare you for life. And then that was a defining moment for me, because it made me realize that my role is not just to be an advisor, but my role is to be an advocate. And so, because of that moment, because of that, I was able to really start to really build relationships with people in the community, to really help these young men to thrive and to be all that they needed to be beyond their education. So I would do things like invite Men's Warehouse to come and teach these students how to properly tie a tie. What is the appropriate dress attire when it comes to an interview and professional setting? And so that those were just really defining moments for me, when it came down to understanding that this is not just a position, but it's a calling that I'm meant to fulfill.
So, how has your identity shaped your leadership style?
So I would say my identity has shaped my leadership style, because of the way that because I'm able to really show up as my authentic self, and I bring all of my lived experiences into my leadership. I don't lead from a place of just teaching alone, but I lead from a place of an example. And the example that I set and that I live and that I work from is from a place where I am able to really implement and share my lived experiences as well as my learned experiences, because I also believe that not all past experiences have to be lived experiences. Some of our experiences can be learned, and that is a part of our journey in shaping us as leaders.
When we talk about not just your experiences, but like from where you when you grew up from, a young kid to the person that you are now,
Mhm.
the work that you're doing with the young black and brown males, I'm sure that that's some very impactful work and that's very meaningful.
Mhm.
But when you think about that work as you're doing it, do you think about, what you're doing as to giving back and having other people learning and understanding what that means to pay it forward, to continue that trend of building community?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll tell you that when I work with the Black and Hispanic male students at Valencia College, part of their responsibility to maintain their scholarship at the time was that they had to do community service. And so that is another way that we really built a lot of partnerships in the community because these young men were required to do a certain number of community service to maintain their scholarship. It was a scholarship program, and so some of those examples of volunteerism would be, tutoring or working with to read with the kids that are maybe in K through 12 that could be an inspiration to them, students that maybe they've never thought about going to college, but as a result of seeing someone that's steps ahead of them, that they are able to kind of talk to them and mentor them as almost like as a big brother. And so that was just one of many ways that we encourage these young men to give back at the time. But of course, now I work at the medical college. But I can tell you that even at the medical college that I work at, we do encourage our students to volunteer as well. They are involved in a student led clinic called Shepherd's Hope, where they do give back in that community as well. So volunteerism is something that is always encouraged, as they move forward in their journey.
You spoke of, you having the opportunity of building your own community and just setting some standards of some things that you wanted to build in your community. Can you give us an idea? What does that look like? The community that James McKnight builds and put together. What does that look like?
It looks like a place of belonging. It looks like a place where everyone feels safe, that
Mhm.
everyone feels like their voice matters because it does. It looks like a place where everyone may not look like you, everyone may not have the same zip code, but everyone has something very important to say. And it looks like being in a room where advocacy is the goal. And so that is something that I strive to do, is to advocate, especially for those voices that are not heard or that are or the ones that are misunderstood.
Wow. So what does resilience mean to you personally?
I think resilience mean to me um, faith without boundaries, definitely, but also faith with works. I often say that dreams become a reality when faith connects to a plan. You can
Mm,
dream all day, but if you don't take the time to write down what you're dreaming, to write down what you're envisioning, to write down what it is that you're believing for, that you're dreaming and you're hoping for, is just a dream. But
mm,
in the same way, if all the time that you spend is making plans, making plans, making plans to survive, or you're making plans to meet the goal or meet the deadline, but you never have any time to dream, you never have any time to do vision casting, then that too could be a waste of time. But when you put them together along with your faith, you have the ability to allow what looks like a dream to really become a reality. And that to me is how I would strongly define resilience.
mm. What is one lesson you learned the hard way that changed your trajectory?
That's a good question. I would say I can think of a time where I thought that my path of for my career was in instructional design, and I'm gonna tell you why.
Oh,
I
wow.
thought that that was my path because it was an area in which I felt like I already had a background in education, and that I was able to use my expertise and put it in all of my teaching experience and really put it into um, instructional design and into that whole arena. And so for that reason, I decided to go to school. I went to school and I pursued their master's program. But as I was in this journey of school and I was shadowing instructional designers, we actually had the instructional designers at my previous employer, but I could not get an interview. I could not get like I could not get any movement. And so I began to really go to God in prayer about it. And I'll never forget that I felt like the Lord had said to me, "This is really great that you're doing this, but I never intended for you to go down this path."
Mm.
Oh my goodness. How devastating that was for me to know that I spent all that time in school, because I was 2 semesters away from graduating with a 3.7 GPA with
Mhm.
a master's degree in instructional design. And that was the biggest lesson I learned about the importance of consulting God in all of my ways, knowing that He will direct that path. And that includes my career. And from that day forward, I never stopped consulting Him about every move I make in my career and in my profession.
Wow. That's, I think sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, when we go through this growing up phase, where we're getting to be young adults and we are ready to start adulting, we can pick many things, especially going to college, because that major sometimes changes 3 times. And it's kind of like when you're just going through that process, you're going through it, then you say, no, I don't want to do this. And then you say, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Before finally something like zaps in your head and say, well, do this. And
Yeah.
that's what you do.
Mhm.
So, but apparently, I mean, your journey has been one that's great at this point as we're talking, because,
Mhm.
you got real results and you're where you want to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's move over to talk a little bit about your work in higher education and your student affairs leadership.
Okay.
What initially drew you to the field of student affairs?
I would say it was more so because I felt like I really was able to relate to students. Um, even, first because I was a student, and it just made it easy for me to relate to them, but also because I just felt like student affairs really focuses on building long-lasting relationships. It's about the retention of a student. It's not about the recruiting of them. And I really felt like that really aligned with my personal skills of relationship building and really being able to build that lasting relationship to see students through their journey from the time that they start until the time that they graduate. And that was something that I was really drawn to.
Hmm. How has higher education changed since you first entered the profession?
Oh my goodness, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. I can just remember how, when it started, it seems like to me that I think the biggest change that I've seen is just the demographic of the students. There was a time when there were a lot more traditional students where you went to college right outside of high school, as opposed to now there's a lot of non-traditional students. There are a lot of students who have been in the field and they decide to go back to school, or maybe they're a working mom, or whether maybe they're a veteran who decides to go back to school. And I just think that now we're in a place where there's a lot more diversity when it comes to schools, as well as a lot of international students. The demographic of students from a racial perspective looks different. And so I think a lot of the demographic has evolved over time. And then there's a lot more online opportunities for school, whereas, really, I felt like when, 20 years ago, there were more like a lot more brick and mortar schools versus now there's a lot of online learning opportunities, which has really opened up a lot of doors of opportunities for students to be educated.
As you think about that, and with being in student affairs, can you tell us what does that work do for you when it comes to working in the community or doing work in the community to engage these people, to encourage them to come and maybe come and be a part of higher education? How has that work impacted that work?
I would say definitely when it comes to seeing the value of higher education, I think it starts on the K through 12 level. Um, I
Mm,
think a lot of schools are starting to be a lot more intentional about the recruitment fairs and the ability of having mentor programs, tutoring programs, maybe to actually visit the campus to do a day in the life, or college tours and things of that sort. All of those are great outreach opportunities for schools to really to go beyond the four walls of the college. I know, for instance, at our school, we actually at the Orlando College of Osteopathic Medicine, we do a lot of outreach in the community and work with several different um, um, hospitals and different entities of clinical environments where students are able to not only volunteer but also give um, kids that are coming up, K through 12, as well as pre-med students, exposure um, to medicine, medical education. And I think that's where it starts, is just being able to engage the students at from K through 12 and pre-med prior to them getting to that point, because
mm,
it gives them exposure of the industry. It gives them exposure to different industries. And I think that allows kids to really grow up having a little bit more assurance and confidence and saying, you know what, now that I've had this exposure of being able to shadow and or be in this environment, okay, I can see the value of me going to college or learning more about this industry.
So, what do you believe is the core purpose of student affairs?
I believe the core purpose of student affairs is pretty obvious: is to graduate students, to make sure that not only they graduate, but they're developed in every way, not only academically. That's of course the primary focus, is being academically developed to meet all the requirements for the degree, but also professionally. A lot of times, student affairs do collaborate with the career services and professional services, where they're able to provide employable skill or opportunities for them to learn employable skills. Part of our student affairs department is that we invite guest speakers to come in and talk to students about different industries or different professions, that helps them to learn professional skills as they're developing academically. So I do think that a lot of that centers around the purpose of student affairs.
So, as you're looking into this camera right now, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement you can tell your potential students right now that's looking? What can they expect when they come to your school, and what they're going to get from you, James McKnight?
They're going to get a lot of validation, they're going to get a lot of affirmation. The one thing that I always tell my students when they walk on my campus is that you belong here, and that you have what it takes. You're not missing anything. If anything, it's what you add to the group that matters the most, not what you feel like is lacking. And so I often tell my students to make sure that they understand that they belong here, that what they have to offer is enough, and that it's needed. Your classmates need you. Your community needs you. They need your voice. They need your contributions. They need everything they need your lived experiences. They need everything that you think is not needed because you carry what they don't have. And so I know, and the reason I say that is because a lot of students deal with imposter syndrome, especially in medical school. Because in medical school, you have a lot of students who are top tier. They may have been at the top of their class. They may have been the valedictorian. So there's this standard of just, and a lot of pressure to be the best. And so it could be very stressful at times. But I oftentimes encourage the students to not uh, minimize what they bring, not just their academics, but all of their lived and learned experiences.
So, how do you build trust with students from diverse backgrounds?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say I build trust through intentional relationship building. I build trust through understanding the individuality of a student, to know that they're not a number, but they are a life with an experience, and most importantly, with a story. I take time to really try to understand the story of all of our students, because oftentimes students are known as a number, or as a cohort, or as a group, and they're grouped a lot. The Black students, the Hispanic students, the LGBTQ plus students, all of these students are grouped. The at risk students, the top of the class students, they're always grouped. So I think the most important thing about students and building relationship is getting to know their individual story, their individual background, and understanding who they are, and not just what they've done, or how they've performed, because how they perform may not be the full, or is not the full story of who they are. It's just a part of them. And so I think that's the most important part of building relationship.
Well, I got a comment here that I know you definitely would like to respond to. It's a really great one here. This is from Jazz5522. Jazz says, I wish I had a professor tell me that I matter and that I'm needed. We need more teachers like you. Thank you for caring.
Oh, thank you for that. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is I oftentimes share what I often wanted to hear. I was the only Black in many of my classes, when I was in college. And so sometimes, people take the approach of being the victim of their experience, where others take the approach of being the victor of their experience. And so I really appreciate her for saying that.
What role does empathy play in your leadership?
I would say empathy is definitely something that is not common among men. It is something that either you have or you don't, but it can be developed over time. But it is definitely something, in my opinion, is necessary to really connect with students, because especially understanding that each student has a story. And so empathy is a huge part of connection, not only when it comes to students, but when it comes to anyone. When there's no empathy, there's no connection. And if
Right.
there is a connection, it's not genuine. It may be we're connected because we work in the same building, or we connected because we're in the same classroom, but that doesn't make it a genuine connection.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I've experienced that once while I was in college.
Wow.
Um, how do you balance administrative responsibilities with student centered work?
That's a good question. Yeah, because as an administrator, you do have a lot of responsibilities, and especially considering, like, if you start out being student facing, like myself. I started out as an advisor, so I was a lot more student facing as than now as an administrator, where I don't have the time to actually be as student facing as I used to be. But I will say what allows me to be student centric is to make sure that I check in with students. And I do so through focus groups. So I may not always be able to lay eyes on every student and really talk to every single student on campus, but I make it my business to have focus groups every semester so that I am in touch with them, so that I understand what it is that they're going through and how I can be a support to them. And I often do it with all of the cohorts. So each cohort has focus groups each semester, and that's my way of being able to check in and stay in touch with them.
Oh, wow. And so, as you do those focus groups, what made you decide to do the focus groups? Because, again, in mentioning, how you've got this wide array of paperwork that you got to do,
Yeah,
what made you come up with the focus group to do on the basis that you do, and how do you pick the students?
good question. Well, I can tell you that I always bring food to my focus group, so I never have a problem with students participating in them or wanting to volunteer in them, because when you have a full day of classes, that lunch time really matters, so that in itself is not really a challenge in terms of inviting students. But the reason why I decided to do the focus groups is because I do think it is important to touch base with students every semester. Frequent
Mhm.
touch points really impact their overall experience of the student life from the time that they start into the time that they graduate. And what I begin to really understand about the different cohorts is that each cohort has a different set of challenges. So, what the freshmen are going through, the sophomores may not be going through, or what, in the world of medical education, the first year students and the second year students, they have different challenges because they're in different classes. And so having these focus groups not only allow me to understand how I can support them, but then it allows me to be able to pass it on to all of the departments. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll take the feedback and I'll share it with the different departments so that it helps to improve upon the coursework and the course experiences of these classes. And so it's definitely a twofold. It provides an open space for them to share, but then it also is an opportunity for growth for us as a college.
What's the most rewarding part of working in higher education? Well, what
Graduation.
is? What is?
What is definitely, I'll say graduation. Seeing those students walk across the stage and graduate, get their degree is the reward. One of the greatest rewards. But I also say seeing them in the news, for good news, or on a magazine, or on social media, seeing students do well, and is the greatest reward that I can ever receive, even beyond a thank you.
Mm. What is the most challenging part? That is of being in student affairs and being in leadership there.
I would say the most challenging part is that you know, when it comes to advocating for students, that's a very first of all, advocating is hard, period.
Mhm.
Because, when you're advocating for someone, oftentimes they're not in the room.
Mhm.
And when you're advocating for them in a way to where you are trying to convey their experience to faculty or staff that may not fully understand their experience. But because you have built relationship with these students, because you have been intentional about touching base and having focus groups and staying in touch with them, you understand things that others in higher ed may or may not understand. And so that can be a challenge, but it also can be an opportunity for you as an administrator, as a leader, to um, to properly convey what it is the challenges are. So I would say definitely advocating for students can be a challenge, knowing that the relationships that you've built with the students may not be the same relationships that other faculty and staff have built with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so how do you approach crisis management in student affairs? And I hope you don't have too much of those, but I'm sure you've got to have a time or two where this is happening.
You don't have enough time for me to tell you about crisis management, but just know if there was a way for me to, uh, I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely something that happens very, very regularly. But I
Oh,
could tell you
wow.
that no crisis is the same. And
Mhm.
when I say regularly, and I don't necessarily just mean at my school, but it just in the 18 years of working in higher education, there's been several
Mhm.
crises that I've had to overcome. But in terms of addressing it, it goes back to what you said earlier, which is empathy, understanding that, um, having empathy as well as understanding the situation is a huge part of resolving it. Oftentimes, I have to be very neutral, because I'm usually the liaison between the faculty and the staff and the student, and so that in itself causes me to have to be very neutral. I have to be very strategic, but very also empathetic, understanding of not taking sides, knowing that I've built a relationship with my colleagues who I work with, but I've also built relationship with the students who I also work with. And so really coming into it with empathy, with a neutral approach, but also with a strategy. We have to set up systems and put processes in place of how we are going to handle situations depending on what it is.
Wow. Um, what innovations do you believe the field needs most?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like when it comes to innovation, I feel like what's really needed the most is the understanding of the demographic because it's constantly changing, you
Yes.
know. And I just recently conducted a training on our Gen Z students,
Okay.
and most of the training was spent talking about how to approach Gen Z students, how to support them on their level, how to approach curriculum in a way to where it's receivable, where it would actually transition into where they can understand. How do we engage with them? What's the best way to communicate with them? All of these things is a huge part of what I believe is important in understanding the demographic of our students and knowing that it changes. So we can't approach the same strategy of reaching out to students and engaging with students 20 years ago or not even 10 years ago in the same way that we do now. It won't work. It won't be effective, and the data shows.
Ask you this because that's very interesting. How much of that training encompassed sensitivity training?
Good question. Man, that's a really good question because I could tell you sensitivity training is something that is not it's not you know, it's not used enough. But I think it's so important, especially when you are dealing with students from all walks of life. And I think that really ties into empathy, is doing sensitivity training. These are what I would call, I know sometimes people call them soft skills, but I think it's really more so human skills to really
Right.
say, you know what, having all of those experiences of conducting the sensitivity training really just helps you to connect better with students. You talk about building relationships with diverse groups of students. What may work, again, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, it may not work today. So, but I could tell you, sensitivity training is something that I think is important. Um, um, with the training that I did conduct, it did include some scenario and training. and we did some role play sessions. And I think it was really, we made it pretty fun. But I think it's important to know that sensitivity training has the ability to really impact the trajectory of of students' lives, especially when you are unaware of their upbringing. Because I really feel like that's the thing with sensitivity training. The reason why sensitivity training is so important is because we approach these students without awareness of their past. We
Mhm.
have no idea what these students have had to face, you know, what they've dealt with, what they didn't learn, you know,
Right.
so I think all of that is the reason why sensitivity training is so important.
Mm. Let's move over to your work here as founding director of student affairs at OCOM.
Okay.
Because when we were chatting before the show, and when you were telling me about some of these things, especially some of these programs that you had created, I thought that was really mind blowing
Mhm.
because normally at a lot of different colleges and universities, sometimes, there may be some professors, instructors, or administrators that may think about some things that might need to get done, but you don't normally, on the norm, see a lot of them going out of their way to create spaces like you have.
Mhm.
And can you tell us what was it like helping build a student affairs division from scratch?
I could tell you it was a lot of hard work. But it was also exciting, Um, sometimes people are excited to be the first, until the work begins. And so I could tell you that, I was really excited to start this role as not only the first director, the first Black director, but the first director of this school. It was very exciting, but then it also became very taxing because it meant that there were policies and procedures that had to really be built. Over time, I've had the opportunity to write 35 policies for the student affairs department through all of the organizations that have been embedded in our student organization handbook. And it was a lot of hard work, but I can tell you it was exciting work. And all of this was really done to the leading of the inaugural class. And when that first class came to the campus, they were just excited to start and be the first to enroll in the college just as much as we were excited to welcome them. But definitely it was a lot of happy moments, a lot of exciting moments. The first white coat ceremony was really amazing. So being able to experience and plan and develop that, and host that at the Dr. Phillips Center, Performing Arts Center, was an amazing experience. But I would say definitely the hardest part of it all was, the development of the policies and procedures, because there was quite a few of them.
So, what were the first systems or structures you knew had to be created?
Well, I would say definitely when it came down to the student organizations, that was the primary role and responsibility of student affairs, was to ensure that we manage the student organizations. So being able to create an application process of how do I apply to start an organization? What are the rules and the regulations of an organization? Do I need an advisor? What is their role? What is the roles of the organization? We had to develop the officer roles of president, the vice president, the treasurer, the secretary. And all of those things was probably, I would say, some of the really early on things that we had to establish, because we knew that in October, when the time came, that they would be ready to really start these organizations. But then also the class president and the vice president, we are responsible for all of the student council, all of the leadership, the student leadership of the campus. And so it was very important that we developed policies and procedures on the election process. How, like, what is the campaign guidelines? All of these things which we had to establish for when it came time for the students to run for office, for the elections.
So, can you tell us how did you approach launching 39 student organizations?
I would say I didn't do it alone. Um,
Mhm.
it definitely had the support of staff. We also had a lot of support of cross-functional support from different departments that supported in that. But I can also say that once the systems were built, it made it a lot easier to establish the organizations. And that's why we really spent a lot of time building the student organization handbook, which consists of all the policies and procedures, because those policies and procedures created a system that made it easy for the students to really follow, regarding the application process, as well as the election process.
So, with some of these organizations, can you give us some examples of some of these organizations and some of the things that you actually did to get them up to par?
Absolutely. So most of the student organizations are specialty based, which is very common in medical education, where you have specialty based organizations like OBGYN organization, pediatrics organization, uh, um, family medicine, basically whatever specialty that students are interested in learning more about, they will join that organization. So surgery club, like all of those clubs are very well known and are the most common organizations. But because our school is 60%, um, the 60% of our students are students of color. So because of that, we also have um, organizations that really caters to the demographic of our students. So we have an organization for Caribbean students. We have an organization for Hispanic students. We have an organization for military students, for LGBTQ and plus students. We have organizations that really contribute to all of the demographic of our students, that really helps to create a culture of belonging. And some examples of how these organizations have really gotten established is they've invited guest speakers to come to speak at their organization events. So, for instance, the surgery club will invite a surgeon from a hospital to come and talk to them about their experience as a surgeon, and what it was like going through medical school, and all of the things that they learned and the things that they wish they knew when they were in school, and what steps they should take to prepare for a residency in the surgery club. So that's just kind of an example. We do have an organization for NS or SNMA, which is Student National Medical Association, which is a club for Black medical students, and they hosted a Black History panel in February where they invited Black doctors in Central Florida to come and talk to them about their experience and their journey of um, of medical school and everything leading up to their journey of being a doctor. And that was another example of just how they've been able to develop their organizations.
You know, we could give some a whole lot more credit to your school because I gotta say, I think the participation or the student engagement in such organizations, will help these students to flourish and to be better persons as they leave the school going out into society. And it seems like you guys are doing a really good job of prepping these students for careers after they get out of school.
Absolutely, yeah. I definitely think that it's been a great opportunity. And one thing I will say is that each organization has an advisor, which